If you've ever wondered how pro musicians can just hear a song once and play it by ear effortlessly without thinking or guessing, this video will change everything for you. I know what you're thinking. Is this really possible? Does this work for beginners? Or is this just another gimmick? Trust me, I had those same doubts. But after struggling for years and testing every ear training method out there, I found that the best musicians, the ones who can really play by ear, use a completely different approach than what's usually taught. And the best part? You don't need fancy music theory, perfect pitch, or years of tedious interval exercises. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how this works, why traditional ear training holds you back, and how you can immediately start learning songs by ear effortlessly by relying on feeling instead of thinking. If you're new here, I am Leonardo, creator of Use Your Ear, an ear training method that has helped over 2,000 musicians develop an intuitive musical ear. Unlike traditional ear training, where you're forced to calculate intervals in a way that feels more like math than music, this method aligns with how your brain naturally processes sound, allowing you to recognize notes and chords effortlessly. In fact, it's the only science-based ear training method available, and our students have rated it excellent on Trustpilot. Today, this method is used in music colleges, conservatories, and universities, such as Wits University in Johannesburg, as well as by professional musicians and music teachers worldwide. And in this video, I'm going to break it all down for you so you can start playing by ear intuitively. A lot of musicians struggle to play by ear even after practicing for years. They try recognizing notes and chords, but feel like they're just guessing. And I get it, I've been there too. Let's take Steven for example. He was a skilled musician, but completely stuck when it came to ear training.
In the past, I attempted to practice using more traditional methods of working on intervals very directly, just memorize a minor third, memorize a major third. And that process to me was very frustrating.
When we started working together, we took a completely different approach. Instead of focusing on intervals, I showed him how to feel notes and chords inside the key.
After having spent these last weeks working with you and realizing that the understanding of music is just as much emotional as it is rational. And classical ear training focuses very intensely on the rational side. And I am very naturally an emotional person. So as soon as I allowed myself to perceive things like tension and resolution in the context of a key, I immediately realized I'm very good at this. I could be good at this. I just didn't have the right approach because I was eliminating the emotional side of the process in favor of the rational side of the process. And the rational side of the process was just causing frustration and boredom.
And within weeks, something incredible happened.
Just this week, I went on Spotify and I looked for a playlist of songs in major keys. And I just started to let it play as I was traveling to the city. And I realized that my brain was very quickly, just spontaneously recognizing what was happening in the harmony. And so whenever the tonic chord plays, I instantly knew that's it, that's the one. And then as soon as we go to the 5, I can feel it. I could feel the chords and I felt confident that I know what it is. And there was no thinking involved. There was no process of me singing the scale in my head looking for, is this the 5? No, it just bang, immediately, that's the 5. I'm not wondering what it is. I can pull out a keyboard on my phone and I can check and confirm that I'm right. And to me, this week has been very surprising and it's been very gratifying because I've begun to see benefits in real music.
Steven's breakthrough wasn't about working harder, as many YouTubers out there are going to tell you. Instead, it was about finally training his ear the way it naturally processes music. And the best part? Anyone can do this. But traditional methods ignore this entirely. They treat music like a math equation, stripping away the feeling that makes recognition intuitive. So if you try to analyze every interval, you're working against how your brain naturally processes music.
None of my teachers, when I studied piano, when I studied guitar, even when I went to singing, none of my teachers put me through exercises or explained to me the things that I have learned with you.
Now I want to show you how this actually works in practice. So I'm going to take you through the process I use to recognize a section of a song by ear. This is going to be the chorus of the song, and we're going to start by recognizing the chords. The first thing I'm going to do is to recognize the tonic. of the song. And I'll explain why as we go ahead, but let's play this segment of the song and then we'll go ahead. This is a tonic. So now I'm going to find what note it is by checking on the instrument. It's C. So we are in C major. When we know the tonality, now I know that C major is going to have the resolution feeling. It's going to be the most stable chord in the progression. And since I've internalized the feeling of the 7 chords that are included in the key, by feeling the chords, I can now recognize them and know where they are on the instrument. So the progression goes like this. In this case, the progression is 4, 1, 5. Okay? And I'm not thinking of intervals in recognizing the progression. I'm just thinking about the level of tension and the position of the chord inside the scale. And I can feel that when the progression moves onto the 4th chord, it has the sensation of the 4th chord, which is kind of not very stable, but not very tense feeling. And then as it moves to the 1, it goes back home, and I can feel that there's no tension, it's completely stable there. And I can feel that the progression goes to the 5 because this is the most unstable chord. And it really wants to solve back to 1. It's like da, da. So it's this movement that allows me to, this movement between tension and resolution that allows me to recognize the chords in this case. So I'm not thinking about distances, I'm not thinking about intervals, I'm just feeling where the progression is going, how tense or solved the chords feel, and thanks to that, I'm able to recognize chords much more quickly than thinking of intervals, and it's a way more intuitive process. I don't have to calculate a lot of things. There's always a tiny bit of calculation going on, but it's so quick that I don't even realize it consciously. And that's how all the great musicians I know that have relative pitch really do this, really recognize chords quickly and intuitively. There's another common mistake that a lot of people fall into when recognizing chords or also melodies by ear, is that they rely too much on the instrument. So they, instead of understanding the chord in their head as they are listening to the chord and then playing it on the instrument, they try and go like this. Oh, which chord matches? It's called the trial and error approach. And you don't want to do that because this doesn't train the mental abilities that are required to recognize chords and melodies intuitively and quickly. So it doesn't really develop your ear. An important thing that you need to keep in mind, for example, is that as I started this task, the first thing I did was recognizing the tonic, right? And that's absolutely an essential part of recognizing chords, melodies, because it allows you to really understand not only which key we're in, but it allows to set your mind onto a specific tonality so that you can actually feel the sensations properly. A mistake that happens in the beginning is that the tonality is not very stable in the beginning. So, for example, right now, if I try to sing the tonic, I might be able to remember it. Even if I'm talking and I'm not playing the song all the time, I can remember it. Let's try. Dum. Yeah, maybe not exactly on pitch, but almost. So this means that the tonality remains in my head. Keep in mind this, I have not been remembering the note, the tonic note, in my head for the whole time. I just feel the tonality. And so by feeling the tonality, I can recall the tonic note anytime I want. I can recall the second degree anytime I want. And any other degree if I want to. So I wasn't born with this, of course. I learned this. I actually wasn't able to match pitch when I started, which is the lowest level possible. This is a skill that you need to develop. It's called tonic retention, is the ability to retain the tonality, not just the tonic, but the entire tonality. And this allows you to perceive the sensations I'm talking about a lot more clearly. And in the beginning, the sensations are fuzzy. I get it. Everyone starts there. But if you want to feel these sensations and learn to recognize the 4 from the 5, from the 1, from the second, very intuitively, you need to start by developing the tonic recognition and tonic retention skills. It's important to understand that this skill is not going to develop if you go by trial and error, as I was showing before. And same thing, it's not going to develop if you practice intervals. Interval exercises are actually counterproductive for this, because when you practice interval exercises, you don't have a tonality. So they are atonal exercises by definition. It's like trying to grow your biceps by running. It's not going to work. Probably they will shrink, so instead of growing. So you don't want to do that. I'll go ahead and recognize a few more chords from another section of the song before we move on to the melody.
Golden drops fall to the violet floor. A starry blanket with our dreams in.
Okay, so it's 1, 5, 6, 4. Repeat it twice. I would consider this a low-level intermediate task in our method. So it's not an advanced progression at all, but it's normal if you're a beginner that you're not able to do this. But if you want to be able to recognize jazz progressions or whatever more complicated progression than this, you need to be able to do this quite easily and quite quickly. It shouldn't take a lot of mental fatigue to do this. And that's what we teach in our method. I'm quite confident in saying that everybody who follows what we teach can get to this level easily. Let's now work on recognizing a melodic phrase from the song by ear. The first thing I would do is the same as before, so recognize the tonic. In this case, it's the same song, so same tonic, but I'll refresh it in my mind. So I'll listen to the melody once and recognize the tonic.
Call me when your life gets out of hand.
Again, see, as before. At this point, I should listen to the melody again and recognize the notes. But before recognizing the notes, I should memorize the melody. This is something I've said in other videos on this channel. You can't recognize something that you don't remember. So memorizing the melody is an essential part of the recognition process, and a part that's often overlooked. So I'm going to play the melody once. I'll do my best to memorize it, and then I'll analyze the notes soon after.
Call me when your life gets out of hand.
Da 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 da. So, da. I hear this is the third degree. Da 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 da. So it's 3 2 3 2 3 6. 1 2 3. Okay. So something like that. I might be messing up the rhythm. I'm not focusing on the rhythm a lot right now, but these are the notes sang by the vocals. I will just play the melody on top of the vocals so that we can double check that everything is correct.
Call me when your life gets out of hand.
Okay, so again, it's the same process you've seen before for chords. At first you recognize the tonic, so you stabilize the tonality, you establish a clear tonality in your head, then you can feel the sensation of the notes properly, and you can start recognizing scale degrees. This works because by training properly, we can associate a specific sensation to the corresponding scale degree. So when we hear the scale degree playing, we can feel, oh, that's the third degree. Oh, that's the first degree, okay? And we can recall it too. So again, I'll just make another example with the tonic. So I can recall it however, whenever I want. This is an essential skill. The thought process I just used was, okay, let me think of the most stable note. Given that I've just heard this tonality playing, the most stable note was the tonic of that tonality. And so the same thing happens with every other note in the key, really. Every other note has its own specific sensation. So you can recall and you can recognize them intuitively. Of course, when recognizing a melody, especially longer melodies like this one, it's not very short, there might be a slight intervention from a more rational approach. So for example, when I recognize the third degree, to check if I was correct, I very quickly sang the scale in my mind, like 3, 2, 1. And so this allows me to check, okay, this is 3, 2, 1. Yes, so I landed on 1. I'm sure this is 1. So I'm double checking. And this is an additional process you can use on top of the intuitive aspect to double check if you were right or not. But at any given time, I'm always thinking about the scale. I'm thinking about the tonality. I'm not thinking about intervals. And a very cool advantage that thinking of the scale has compared to thinking of intervals is the type of mistakes you can make by thinking of intervals is way, way more musical than whatever you can make by thinking of the scale. If you think of the scale, the worst mistake you can make is just play another degree of the scale instead of the correct note, let's say, okay? I'll do an example with this melody. So the correct melody was, okay? You can play this instead of the correct melody. Instead of doing, you can do. Sometimes the sort of mistakes happen because if notes are quick, maybe you don't memorize them correctly or you distort them while memorizing, let's say. It's not a bad mistake. It's not an unmusical mistake. Absolutely not. Most people won't even hear the difference between the two melodies I've just played. So this is the kind of mistakes you can make by thinking in terms of scale degrees. On the other hand, if you think of intervals, the mistakes you can make are totally different and are much more unmusical. And I'll make an example for you to better understand this. Let's say you think of intervals and you're able to recognize the first part of the melody correctly. So it's, sorry. Okay, you got this. Then you make a mistake calculating the big skip that there is from, okay, this interval, which is just a fifth. And instead of doing this, you think it's a fourth. So you do this. Then from here, every other note you recognize is going to be wrong. And potentially, they're all going to be out of key. So you might come up with a melody that sounds like this. Something like that, okay? This is absolutely unmusical, right? Because you're playing notes that are out of key. And the out of key notes sounds totally bad. So that's a big mistake. Whereas you're totally protected against this type of unmusical mistakes if you think in terms of scale degrees. This is just one reason why it's just a much more musical way of practicing your training than intervals. That's enough about intervals. Another important point I want to emphasize is that, as you've seen, I'm not using a trial and error approach in recognizing the melody. So I'm not trying to guess the notes. I'm not doing this.
Call me when your life gets out of hand.
Which note is this? So it's okay. Instead, I'm listening to the melody, memorizing the melody, and then I'm analyzing it in my head. And then when I have an idea of what the notes are, I play them on the instrument. This is absolutely essential because if you go by trial and error, you're not going to develop important essential skills that allows you to recognize music melodies by ear. Skills like tonic retention, tonic recognition, we've just seen them. You're not going to develop musical memory. You're not going to develop the ability to analyze the notes in your head. You're not going to be able to become faster at analyzing the notes because it will always be a guessing game. So you're not training anything really by doing that. You're just training your ability to hear a note and match it on your instrument. But this is like one of the most basic skills that are absolutely not enough to recognize melodies in real time and to be confident about what you're doing. So if you actually want to develop a real mind to instrument connection where you actually hear something and you can play it on your instrument, or you hear something in your head and you can translate immediately onto the instrument, into your DAW, whatever it is, you absolutely need to avoid the trial and error approach because it's not going to help you develop any skills that drive you toward this goal. Anyway, these were a few examples that show how I approach recognizing melodies and chords, how I approach teaching this sort of stuff. I hope everything is clear, but if you have any questions, you can leave them in the comment section below. I'll be very happy to reply, but don't leave this video yet because I have something very important to share that you might be interested in. If you want to experience this for yourself, we've put together a free training where you'll work on a real song, just like I did. I'll guide you step by step through recognizing your first chord progression and melody entirely by ear, and how to translate that to the instrument. And more importantly, I'll show you how to do this by relying on feeling instead of thinking. No intervals, no overanalyzing, just the most intuitive, natural way to recognize notes and chords based on their unique musical feel. Now you might be wondering, why isn't this included in this YouTube video? Well, because this is not going to be just a tutorial. It's an interactive training where you'll actually input your answers to exercises in real time. Based on your responses, we will give you tailored recommendations that match your current skill level and help you overcome specific challenges you might be facing, something we simply can't do in a YouTube video. Anyway, this training is free for now, and you'll even receive some bonus materials after attending, but it won't be available forever, so don't wait. Click the link in the description, register for free, and start recognizing chords and melodies by ear through feeling instead of thinking. And if you're not ready for the free training yet, check out this other video where I share the #1 ear training secret musicians regret not knowing sooner.